since we bought our first Nissan Leaf in September 2014, we've wanted to do vehicle to grid. This year, because we've been able to upgrade to a 62 kilowatt hour car, it's become a possibility. Slightly more complicated for us because our electricity supply was looped through our neighbours. So we had to have several teams come to help us: Kaluza, Kier, OVO and Western Power. This is the system they've put in, and this is the story of how they did it. To have vehicle to grid, we had to have our own connection directly to the three-phase cable in the street. The process was started by digging 2 holes, one in the service reserve, that's the pavement to you and me, and one beneath our electricity meter cupboard. We had been told a trench would be dug between the road and our meter. So when we discovered they would try to use a mole to dig under our paved frontage, we were delighted. Steve, the mole, lined up the compressed air-powered mole. Nearly half an hour of tension followed while we waited to see just how good was Steve's aim. We needn't have worried.
There you go, Steve the mole.
The groundworks team cleared up after themselves, leaving the way clear for the connection team scheduled for the next day. While the cable in the street was opened up, we were being disconnected from our neighbour's supply. Both holes had filled with water overnight, not from rain, but from seepage. I didn't envy the cable jointer who had to make our new 80 amp connection to a live cable while standing in 6 inches of water. That is 1/2 of a mould, as you will see. The 2 mould halves were fixed around the vulnerable new connections and filled with resin. The cable that previously brought us electricity via our neighbour was pushed down out of sight in the neighbour's box. And the street connection topped up with a second bucket of resin. With our house now on its own 80 amp supply, blue phase if you're interested, the connections team brought day 2 to a close. The OVO team arrived next morning, bringing the new vehicle to grid charger. Vehicle to grid depends on having an internet connection, as OVO needs to send instructions to the car to charge itself or discharge to the grid as necessary. A TP link was installed in our kitchen. A hole drilled through the kitchen wall allowed a cable to run to both our smart meter and the charger. It was at this point that a second groundworks team arrived to fill the holes made on day 1. When you are bailing out a hole in the road, you have to trust the guy controlling the grab inches from your head. Groundworks Team 2 left and V2G installation continued. There was a lot more to this installation than we expected. Next to arrive was the tarmac duo, there to finish the pavement surface and clear the barriers. We had to have a further circuit breaker and isolation switch for the new charger, following which the moment came to kill the power for a while. Work carried on outside by torchlight while I practiced scales in the dark. Well, there's not much else to do. The charger was connected via the internet to Kaluza, and we set up our account. Stephen brought the car back, and I connected it to the grid for the first time. This was the moment the first ever 62 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf sent power to the grid. Add a digital signature and the process was complete. Turn your life away.
That's it. There you go.
Bye. As you've seen, that was a pretty complicated process, and we were very impressed with how the teams came together, dovetailed, came at the right times, got everything sorted out for us. The only visible scar we have on our land is where the hole was filled in here, so we're very, very impressed with all that. And as you can see here, we are now exporting to the grid, so it seems to be working very well for us. At the end of the month, we'll have more idea how the figures are working out, and we'll make another video to tell you all that. So hit the subscribe button below and the notification bell to make sure you see the next episode. Hello again, we're here to bring you our third update on how our 62 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf is faring connected to vehicle to grid. We have chosen this time because it's exactly 1 year ago that we took delivery of our new Leaf. So after 8,781 miles and 290 days connected to vehicle to grid, has the car prospered or suffered? Are we pleased or unhappy with this great experiment? And of course, have we made or lost money? We left Fish Brothers in Swindon on the 15th of August 2019 with the new car. Before we even went home, we drove directly to Indra in Great Malvern, where Mike Schooling and his talented team, who designed the vehicle to grid charger, were waiting to try it out on a 62 kilowatt hour Leaf for the first time. On the 1st of November, the V2G installation was completed, and of course you can watch our video all about that. We made another video in February that included some rather vague results, but since then the car has always been connected to the grid via the V2G system when at home. On the 16th of March, we drove from Worcester to Darwin Forest in Derbyshire to see family, and while we were there, Boris announced a ban on all driving except for essential journeys. For quite a while after this, our car travelled just 2 miles per week. That's the distance to our local Tesco and back. You may remember we had previously set Kaluza to have the car charged to 90% by 9 AM every day. By the first Friday of lockdown, we realised it would be sensible to change this. We reset the Kaluza app to always retain 35%, but not charge higher than 70%. Most importantly though, we abandoned altogether our ready-buy requirement. A spread of 35% to 70% seemed reasonable, and our thinking was if the car was going to be idle, we would rather have the battery being charged and discharged a reasonable amount every day, rather than sitting here, say at 60% for a week after week. There was no scientific reasoning behind this, it just seemed like a sensible thing to do. So, in effect, we gave the grid 22 kilowatt hours of battery to play with as and whenever it wished. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Let's see what happened. Here are two typical charge-discharge graphs from just before we changed things. Charging the car in the early hours to reach 90% by 9 AM, and discharging to support the grid from around 4 PM, tailing off around 10 PM. Now compare these two example days. Although we allowed the grid to use 22 kilowatt hours of our battery's 62 kilowatt hour capacity, on Saturday the 28th, the car took 31.6 kilowatt hours from the grid and sent 25.6 kilowatt hours back. In other words, that 22 kilowatt hours was used more than once during each 24-hour period. 35% of our battery was obviously plenty, and we felt it kept the charge-discharge range within sensible limits for a car that was essentially otherwise sitting idle. When we know that we will need the car for a longer trip next day, we simply hit the boost button in the app or on the machine around 10 PM and we wake up to 100% charge the following morning. This has worked out so well, we don't have any plans to return to our original 90% by 9 AM every day. The grid certainly likes it, and it works for us. However, does the car like it? One of the most common questions we're asked is what has happened to our car's battery since we've had vehicle to grid. So let's find out. We'll start by calculating the totals for V2G and our travel over the last 12 months. The odometer shows the car travelled 8,781 miles. Drive Computer 2, which we zeroed when we received the vehicle, says we averaged 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour over the year, and the energy economy gauge says 3.4. The simple sum, 8,781 divided by 3.5, tells us we used around 2,500 kilowatt hours by travelling. How does this compare with the electricity the battery has used in vehicle to grid since last November? We added up all the totals reported by the Kaluza app since we've had vehicle to grid. We discovered the car has imported a total of 5,261 kilowatt hours and exported a total of 3,297 to the grid. Vehicle to grid has used over twice the battery capacity that we've used in driving, and most of that has been while allowing only 35% of our battery capacity to be used. So the next obvious question is, how has the battery coped with this? Let's look at the data. Here's a screenshot of the battery condition taken with Leaf Spy Pro on 29th of August last year. The important figure here is the battery state of health, SOH, which was at 99.38%. We see the same figure in this details screen. Below that is this one, which says the battery health is 107.19%, whatever that means. Let's compare these with today's figures almost exactly a year later. We see a state of health of 97.76%, a drop of 1.62%. In the same period, the battery health figure in the details screen shows us an increase from last year's 107 to 112%. Let's be honest, we have no idea what that battery health figure means. If you know, leave a comment below and enlighten us all. But what is clear is that during the past year, we appear to have lost maybe 1.6% of our battery capacity. This equates to 3-point-something miles of our 230-mile range. Being 1 year old, the vehicle has had its first service last week. Let's have a look at the battery report. We'd expect no less, especially with a state of health of 97.76%. And of course the car's own battery capacity gauge shows full. By the way, the sharp-eyed amongst you might have spotted the odometer in the car does not match the number reported by LeafSpy. We have no idea why they differ. Again, if you know, pop a comment in the box below. While we're looking at the LeafSpy stats, let's notice something else as well. We reckon we've charged on a rapid charger no more than 15 times since we've had the car. How come the stats show 278 quick charges and only 62 level 1 or level 2 charges? Vehicle to Grid uses the CHAdeMO connector, yet it only delivers 6 kilowatts of power to the car. It's obviously either plugging this in or perhaps delivering a DC charge that the car counts as a quick charge, not the actual power. Is this why the Advice for Your Usage section of the Servicing Battery Report cites frequent use of quick charging as a cause of gradual loss of capacity? And if so, why does it go on to recommend your score is very high and good for your battery? Okay, we find all this fascinating, but equally interesting is the money. You may remember back in February we were finding it really difficult to make much sense of what was happening financially. Large gaps in our February usage graph meant we had to have a correction in March. This shows as a balance adjustment of £82.95. However, in April, OVO changed its corporate mind and refunded it again. So once more, we're left a little bemused to say the least. Remember, we have solar panels, so these figures take those into account as well as vehicle to grid. The headline news, though, is that from April onwards, we have made an overall profit on our energy bills every month. Pause the video and examine our figures as much as you like. You will notice this is all our energy, including our gas, which we use for heating in the winter, cooking and hot water all year. Obviously 2020 has been an odd year, and from here on it's a gentle slope downwards towards winter. But given that OVO's accounting is improving, we hope to see an understandable, smooth transition into the winter months when days shorten and we use more electricity and gas. So far though, we're not complaining. We may well return in the new year and give you an update on our first full year of vehicle to grid. Thank you for watching, and thank you for all the many really interesting comments and questions on our previous videos. We do answer every one, so don't be shy. If you have a question, type away. Please do all the usual stuff, like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and we'll see you next time. Hello again. It's 10 months since we last updated you on our progress towards changing from vehicle to grid to vehicle to home. At that time, you may remember, I said this: we have reached a tipping point in the saga, but we felt we needed to know what was going to happen next before making this fourth video. The fact is, right now, we don't know what will happen next. Well, now we do. In fact, everything has come together in the last couple of days. But first, in all our videos, we have answered the main question people ask us when they know we have been doing V2G. How is your car battery holding up? So let's have another look. Last September, it was standing at 93.85%. After another 10 months of driving and vehicle to grid, we were expecting an SOH of about 91%. We're delighted to report that when we checked with LeafSpy Pro on the 20th of July, the state of health of our battery is currently 93.31%. So we've lost only 0.54 of 1% in the last 10 months. Our 62 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf has reached its 4th birthday and has just had its annual service and MOT with Fish Brothers in Swindon. While the car was away, Indra flashed their new V2H software into our charger. At the same time, knowing this was about to happen, we set in motion the switch from OVO to Octopus Energy's Flux tariff. That too happened on the same day. In every case and at every time of day, the export rate is less than the import. The only way to make money by sending electricity to the grid is by importing between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. and exporting during peak hours. That is not what vehicle to home is for. The schedule built into the Indra portal has been set up to make the most of vehicle to home. From 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. it buys cheap green electricity from the grid and charges the car. From 5 a.m. right through until 4 p.m. it does what is called load matching. This means the charger will always aim to keep our use of electricity being bought from the grid as close to zero as possible. If our house is generating surplus energy from our solar panels, the charger will send it to the car rather than exporting it to the grid. When we cook a meal or run the washing machine, our house is obviously consuming more energy, especially after dark. This would normally result in a net import from the grid. Indra's V2H unit will take more electricity from our car battery to meet the power needs of our home rather than buying it from the grid. From 4 p.m. until 7 p.m, the unit will discharge any surplus electricity to the grid to gain the advantage of the highest peak time export rate of the day. Finally, from 7 p.m. until 2 a.m, the system reverts to load matching, so we use no expensive day rate electricity during the evening. We wanted to update you as soon as possible, so we've made this quick video. Right now, however, we have less than 24 hours of stats, so it's far too early to have any sensible figures. We're pretty certain we have not imported 4.7 megawatt hours during July. Of course it will settle down and make sense. Keep watching and we'll update you in due course. It's taken longer than we hoped to make this switch, but suddenly everything has come together on the same day and it all changes from here on in. Exciting times. Make sure you've subscribed. Bye for now.